This is 660 AM. The Answer.
More of Ladies Can We Talk with Debbie Georgatos, right here on 660 AM The Answer.
And hello there, and welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. We always hate talking over our music. This is Krista Branch. Her music is exactly the theme of my show, and I've invited her to come on the show the Sunday after Christmas. She's got a great story, and plus her music just blesses this show so much. Okay, so welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. We have in studio tonight a candidate for Congress, CD32 from Texas, Paul Brown. Hello there.
Hi, Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me on the show.
So happy you're here. And I'm going to just tell our listeners, I meant to in the opening segment, but I got a little wound up. I want to introduce you a bit to our listeners. Paul Brown is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran of the war in Iraq. I'll just stop and say thank you for your service. He worked for 9 years in the intelligence community. He started 2 small businesses. He's the author of a book on warfare. That sounds good. He's a conservative, liberty-minded Republican. He believes it's time to replace members of the Republican establishment who have repeatedly let down the American public.
That's
wow,
right.
That's right. Okay, so, I want to just jump right in. I do want our listeners to hear a little bit more about your life story and why you're running. And so I want to let you start with that. And then I want to just run through a bunch of issues and try to hit them quickly. But tell us more about why you're running.
Well, sure. I spent close to 9 years in the intelligence/national defense community. And, I feel I had to sacrifice very little personally. It was a pleasure to be a part of that, and it was a true honor. But I know people that have sacrificed much, much more than I, and I believe that their sacrifice is truly worth fighting for. And what that means is not just going overseas to fight a war, but also in America trying to ensure that we maintain a country worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. I live in District 32. I'm running against Pete Sessions, and he has done a terrible job representing true conservative values, representing liberty, representing personal responsibility, and quite the contrary. You were talking about the Omnibus. He voted for that. So he voted for funding Planned Parenthood. He voted to fund Obama's immigration and refugee agenda. He voted to fund Obama's climate deal. And this is nothing new for him, though. Over the years, he's voted to raise the debt ceiling 8 times. He's voted for over $1 trillion in bailouts. Last year, he voted to send funding to the Syrian rebels, a lot of which went to ISIS. And enough is enough. I can't sit back and let this type of establishment Republican ruin our party and ruin our country, and I had to do something about it.
I was going to comment. My husband and I have only been in Texas 15 years, but we still claim we're natives because we feel like we always belonged here. And I think that for some people listening, they were around when Pete Sessions first started talking about running or first decided to run for Congress. And I think that, I think America was a very different time then. I think that where we are right now in the world, first of all, in the world with respect to the threats of radical Islam, and then in America where we are with our radical president who, once we all saw who President Obama really was, the idea that his agenda could make an inch of progress was something that every Republican elected should just have been fighting at every step of the way. And this is whether, I guess people have been in, I like term limits. We don't have them, but I think it'd be good if we did. But I think especially in the last 7 years, there's been a profound need for leadership and articulate, passionate, patriotic, clear leadership on the GOP side that seems to be missing. And Pete certainly has not provided that, in my opinion.
You're absolutely right. And, it's the voting portion of being in Congress or being a representative is very important, but it is about leadership. It's about having a voice. And we so often hear silence from much of the Republican Party on these issues that are important to us: immigration, the Islamic State, what's going on in Syria right now. I've actually had a conversation with Pete Sessions directly about why he and other members of the party refuse to vote for a new authorization for use of military force in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is of particular importance to me because right now we have around 10,000 troops in Afghanistan, around 3,000 in Iraq, and they're all operating under the same authorization for use of military force that we passed in 2002 and 2003, which is to say that what they're doing now has nothing to do with what we were doing back then, and there's no clear goal. There's no clear objective. if you read my book on warfare, you'll find that I really believe we need to commit to winning the conflicts we're in, and it's a either or situation. If you can't commit, get out. If you're going to be there, then commit and win. Don't just have troops on the ground for no reason.
I love hearing that, and we've had many experts in the show talking about the threat of radical Islam, the fact that radical Islam is essentially engaged in a war against the West, whether we know it or want to fight back or not. They really are, and I think your military background and understanding of warfare, and then writing a book about it, would be very valuable for people in Congress to have that input, because Congress is made up of people who are, former lawyers. Nothing against lawyers. My husband and I are lawyers, but, nothing against all kinds of people, but this military knowledge. And I didn't even honestly, until you said this, realize that a renewed statement, what we need, I'm sorry, say it again. We need
authorization for use of military force, or AUMF,
which further would articulate what our purpose is. That's the reason we need a new one.
Well, our purpose and essentially it would just solidify support by the nation of those troops there through our representative government. Right now, all the troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, so on, are basically operating at the whim of the president. The president doesn't know what he's doing. He's proven over and over and over again that he has no real solid ability to run any of the conflicts over there going properly. We shouldn't have helped overthrow Gaddafi. We should not have encouraged the overthrow of the president in Egypt, and we should not have encouraged the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. We have a schizophrenic foreign policy in Syria right now.
I love that word, schizophrenic foreign policy. I do want to talk with you about, we have talked on the show also a lot about the current controversy involving Syrian refugees coming to America. There are innocent people who have been displaced by the violence of ISIS, but obviously then you have the San Bernardino shooter, the wife in that couple, passed our vetting process and clearly was a terrorist. So what is your view? What should we do about the Syrian refugee situation? And before I let you answer, we're speaking, in case you just tuned in, to Paul Brown, who's running for CD 32, the seat currently held by Pete Sessions, United States Congress from Texas.
It is important to acknowledge that this is a difficult issue, that we are people that naturally want to be compassionate. However, we have to be wise. And from the perspective of government, it's the job of the government to protect its own people. That is the foremost reason for a government to exist. And when you look historically at conflicts like World War II, World War I, would we just let anyone from Germany or Japan in World War II into the United States? No, absolutely not. Even though, like you said earlier, even if we do not acknowledge that Islamic jihadists, that Islamic extremists are waging a war against the West, against the United States, they are. And part of the reason that we have not had to acknowledge it in the same way you would with other conflicts has been the fact that we've been able to keep so many attacks from happening on our soil, despite their best efforts. And their efforts continue day in, day out, 24/7. But if we just drop all the walls and throw off all our defenses and let anyone and everyone in, as we are doing now and as we seem to be continuing to do because of this omnibus bill, we will open ourselves up to further attack, which will almost certainly pull us into more war in the Middle East.
It's the most astonishing thing to watch. I don't know if you tortured yourself and watched the Democrat debate last night, but I did. And I watched a Republican debate, it seems like it was so long ago, it was just this past Tuesday. But I think that's going to be a central issue in 2016 is what exactly is the best way for America to, when you listen to Democrats, it's kind of like manage or somehow avoid a catastrophe. And I want to hear more about, from people who want to actually win and end this war against radical Islam and radical Islamists around the world. And we also had FBI Director Comey testify in Congress. We have no way to vet these people. We have no way to vet to determine whether or not they are Muslims who may become extremists or Muslims who just want to resettle. So I keep waiting for someone on the Democrat or liberal side to answer the question, if you know you can't vet them adequately, why is it you're okay bringing them here? How many more San Bernardinos do we have to have?
Right. Yeah. No, as someone who I worked in watch listing, I can't go into the specifics of why, but I can say this: it's not sufficient, and it never will be. If you let enough people in, the wrong people will get in eventually. If you don't let a lot of people in, they're still going to get in. So imagine how many more will get in when you let in everyone, which is essentially what we're doing now. What you said about the Democrats and their feckless handling of this situation of the global war on terror, or the war of Islamic extremism against the West. It reminds me of what's going on with the UN right now, talking about trying to bring up talks in Syria for peace. And it boggles my mind that people give the UN any credence in this situation. Look what the UN has been responsible for over the years. They oversaw genocide in Sudan, genocide in Congo, in Burundi, in Rwanda, and so on and so forth. They oversee these things and they talk about them, but they don't have any teeth. They don't have the power to change anything, and that's true in Syria as well.
It certainly is. We're actually pretty much toward the end of this segment. I did want to mention to our listeners there was, in the last few days, an announcement by the UN that they are going to begin in January talks toward a Syrian peace plan, and that's a topic for a whole other night. The lack of, because the United Nations has no sovereignty, they can't enforce anything. They can actually call parties together or request they come and talk, and maybe they hammer out some deal. But at the end of the day, when you're dealing with people who have the jihadist mindset, it's unclear how effective the UN can ever be. And, maybe you want to have, and so I guess they're going to start those talks, and it's better than not having them. But it's of great concern because there doesn't seem to be a way to force an end to Islamic Jihadist extremists except through force. And that seems like the only way to go. We are talking with Paul Brown, who's running for U.S. Congress from CD32. And we're going to wrap it up here, but can you tell our listeners how to learn more about your campaign?
Yes. Head over to paulbrowntx.com or look at Paul Brown for Congress on Facebook. Check us out. Donate, share, like, get in contact with me. I'm happy to answer questions of anyone at any time.
And one last thing, tell our listeners how many houses you've knocked on doors in the district. How many?
Over the last several months, I have personally visited close to 8,000 houses in the district, and the response I'm getting is very positive. People are ready for change.
Thank you very much. It's Paul Brown running for CD32, and this is Debbie Georgatos, and Ladies Can We Talk? We're going to zip off to our break, and when we come back, I am going to tell you what I think about a whole bunch of important issues, including dealing with the reality in this presidential election. Is it the Democrats or the Republicans more likely to be able to protect us from radical Islam? Debbie Georgatos, come back after the break.
.660 AM. The